One thing I've learned from our bakery, the Flour Barn, is that owning a micro bakery is about a lot more than just baking. We are constantly looking to improve the customer experience, whether that's through our hours, our menu, our decor, our social media, or even trying to find creative ways to offer new opportunities to our community. In this video, I'll be sharing some of my most requested recipes, taking you along with me to a coffee summit at our local roaster, and also just showing you some behind the scenes footage of our micro bakery, the Flour Barn. So let's get started. Hey everybody, it's Lily from the Flour Barn Homestead. I posted my latest week in the life video last week, and I got a lot of requests for several different recipes. So I thought I'm going to be working on blog posts to go over the full recipe, but I thought I might as well just come on here and do a little tutorial on the two most popular recipes that were requested. So the two most requested recipes from last week's Week in the Life at the Flour Barn Bakery video were our pumpkin spice cinnamon roll recipe and our cosmic brownie recipe. So if you're looking for the sourdough version of our pumpkin spice cinnamon rolls, you can go ahead and head over to the Flour Barn Homestead. That's already on there. But if you're looking for the yeasted version, that is also going to be on there soon, and it will correspond with what I'm going to show you today. So let's get started. As I mentioned, when I'm at home, I mostly use freshly milled grains. And brownies are the perfect recipe to use milled grains in because there's really not that much flour. So using the milled grains just doesn't make that big of an impact. But if you're somebody who's just trying to switch all your recipes over to milled grains, it's a nice one to just have in your recipe book. So I'm just gonna weigh out my berries first because the weight's not gonna change whether they're milled or whether they're flour. So I always weigh my berries and then I'm gonna grind them right into my bowl that I'm baking with. While I'm making my brownies, my pumpkin brioche has actually finished its proof, but to just give me a little more time, I'm going to punch it down and let it double in size again, and this just allows me to have a little more time to keep working on my brownies. This brownie recipe actually has as much cocoa powder as it does flour, so that's why I recommend using a high quality Dutch processed cocoa powder. This is the brown sugar and melted butter mixture. I just pop it in the microwave a little bit longer and you can see it's become a little bit shinier, and that is what we are looking for. Once that mixture has cooled enough, we're going to add our eggs to it. You just want to be careful that the butter is not still hot or it can actually scramble your eggs. Because in brownies we want to decrease the amount of time we're mixing the actual batter, we want to make sure that our eggs are properly beaten before we're adding it to the dry ingredients. Alright, so I have my melted butter, which is going to be like my wet ingredients, and I just melted that butter with the sugar and kind of got a head start on dissolving so that when I mix it in here, we're not getting a grainy brownie. So brownies are, like I said, there's very little flour in here. It's actually mostly this butter and sugar mixture. So if your sugar is really grainy, you're going to taste that in your brownie later on. So we kind of gave it a head start in already dissolving, getting smooth, melting with our butter, and then adding our eggs. We want to mix this as little as possible. Adding too much gluten development to a brownie can cause you to have a dense, chewy brownie, whereas we really just want a fudgy, easy to bite into brownie. So we're going to mix everything as much as possible before adding it in with the flour, because as soon as those wet ingredients hit the flour, that's when that gluten development is going to start to form. So we're going to add this, and we're actually going to use a Dutch whisk. A Dutch whisk is perfect for incorporating wet and dry ingredients with as little mixing as possible. So that's why for things like brownies, scones, biscuits, I always use a Dutch whisk. So we're going to take this, just make sure it's all whisked together. We're going to pour it into our dry ingredients, and you can do it the other way too. I think online I have it where you're adding the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients, but you can't add the wet ingredients to the dry. It really doesn't matter if you're still using the Dutch whisk. It is probably easier to add the dry to the wet because I'm having to scrape this bowl down to make sure I'm getting all the wet ingredients, whereas the dry ingredients would probably just
come off the bowl easier.
If you wanted to add chocolate chips, you would do that right before it's fully incorporated.
Alright, so I'm using our 8-inch pans from the bakery. I wanted to make sure I made it in these because I do say this is a great recipe for cottage bakers. So if you're somebody who's starting a cottage bakery, I just want to show you how this is going to fit in here. Alright, the next thing that we're going to be talking about is the other recipe that was highly requested, which is our pumpkin brioche cinnamon rolls. So, our pumpkin brioche cinnamon rolls are what we sell at the bakery as our pumpkin spice rolls. The difference between these and a regular cinnamon roll is just that we use a pumpkin brioche, and we also use a special icing that has maple extract and shots of espresso. So, because I was at the bakery today, I already went ahead and whipped up our brioche so that it could have a head start. I always try to film during my nap time, so I wanted it to all be risen and ready to go for nap time. So here is the brioche. All you do for this recipe, it's derived from my simple brioche recipe, which is the one I use for my regular cinnamon rolls. The only thing different is that we're replacing some of the milk with pumpkin puree, and then we're also adding spices like nutmeg and ginger. All you do for this brioche, well, this is why we call it simple, is you add all the ingredients into your stand mixer using the dough hook, and you knead it for 12 to 15 minutes. You don't have to do any warming of the butter in the milk. You don't have to do anything special for this recipe. You just add the ingredients together and you knead it until you have the proper amount of gluten development. Now, the way you're able to tell if you have enough gluten development is by performing the window pane test. And all that is taking a piece of that dough and stretching it out. And if you're able to stretch it out to the point where you can see through your dough, you can see the light through your dough, you know that your dough has enough gluten to be able to hold structure for your bread. So your cinnamon rolls aren't going to deflate or flatten or not proof properly. Having enough gluten development is just very important for using bread dough.
Now we are going to get to shaping our doughs. I think that a lot of people underestimate the importance of having consistent rolls. It's really not just about the look of the roll, although that is a bonus. They look much better when they're consistent. It's also about the baking process. If you have one roll that's very large and one roll that's really small, then when they bake, they're going to be done at different times, but you're not going to be individually getting your rolls out. So you want to make your rolls consistent. One way to help your rolls be consistent is by making sure that you start off with a nice crisp rectangle. So you want to have even corners, you want it to be even in width, even in length, and this will help your cinnamon rolls by when you roll up this dough, it's going to make each roll consist of the same amount of dough. So when we roll this up, it will hopefully result in even rolls. And I love how you can see those specks of spices, specks of pumpkin puree. This is just such a beautiful dough. One thing people struggle with is when their butter is not soft enough. They find it hard to spread on their dough. I always make sure I have room temperature butter, and then I microwave it for about 5 seconds. And then it is so easy to just spread all over my rollout. I don't leave any blank spots. I want to make sure that my butter is covering every inch of the dough. Now my cinnamon sugar mixture has a little bit of cornstarch, and that is to help it not to leak out of your roll. One thing that can happen with cinnamon rolls is that the filling starts to leak out in your oven and then it starts to burn. And this can give your cinnamon rolls a bad taste, it can hurt your pans, it can hurt your oven, and also then you lose all that good cinnamon sugar filling. And then I leave 1 inch of the roll out without any of that cinnamon sugar filling, and that is just to help it adhere to the roll once we roll it up. So you'll see I'll start from the back of the rollout and I'm going to roll towards myself. You don't want to make the rolls too tight, but you also don't want to make them too loose. If they're too tight in the center, they're going to pop up, and some of you who have baked cinnamon rolls maybe have had that problem. If they're too loose, all the filling is just going to go to the bottom of the roll and it's not going to be evenly distributed. And as you can see, I am pinching the bottom of my roll out. You can see I have that inch of butter that is helping it stick to itself. And this is just helpful when you are transferring your rolls. You're not going to be losing any of that cinnamon sugar, and it just makes it easier to play around with. Now I'm going to cut that end off because it often doesn't have enough filling. And then I'm going to evenly cut my rolls. I like a roll that is about 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick, and you should get anywhere from 10 to 12 rolls depending on how jumbo sized you like your rolls. I will be using a cast iron skillet to bake these rolls. Anytime I'm at home, I really love using the cast iron skillet. At the bakery, we do use a sheet pan, but we have lots of rolls per sheet pan, so they kind of are next to each other, which helps them to keep their shape. I don't know it matters much if you're using glass, metal, cast iron, but I would recommend using something that has sides. It just really helps them all stay in a good shape and have a nice rise on them. The second proof on these is going to be about 30 to 45 minutes. I'm not looking for these rolls to double. I'm simply looking for them to get a little bit puffy, and then they're going to get even bigger when they go into the oven. And they're going to go into the oven for about 30 to 40 minutes. Everyone's oven is so different, and that is why I recommend using an internal thermometer to make sure they reach the perfect temperature of 186 degrees. Here I am just spreading that buttercream on our rolls. And I mentioned in our blog post that if you're someone who owns a micro bakery and you're operating under cottage food law, an alternative topping for these cinnamon rolls would be a glaze, something that doesn't have cream cheese, because although cream cheese is not allowed under most cottage food laws, butter is under some cottage food laws. In Ohio, it is the case that buttercream is cottage food law safe, and so I would recommend just doing a glaze with melted butter, coffee, maple extract, and powdered sugar. If you make these, your house will be filled with the sweet smell of cinnamon and pumpkin. And my husband was so excited when he got home from work. He actually likes these pumpkin rolls more than he likes our cinnamon rolls, which I think is kind of offensive because those are like my favorite recipe is my standard cinnamon roll recipe. But I will say these were really good, and he even said they were better. And my son and my daughter both really enjoyed them as well. And while we were busy with that, my brownies came out of the oven and now are cooled. And now I'm going to top with them with their signature icing. So really what makes this a classic Cosmic Brownie copycat recipe is the fudgy icing. We're going to start by melting butter and then adding some high quality chocolate to it. I am using Calibit brand chocolate. This is what we use at the bakery. I love this. I actually think it is worth it. It's very expensive, but it comes in bulk, and so I do think it's worth it for specifically this icing and ganaches. So I put it into the hot melted butter and I just whisk it until it completely melts and becomes shiny. And if you're noticing that it's not completely melting, you're welcome to stick it back in the microwave just for about 10 to 15 seconds to make sure all of those chips get completely melted. And then you're going to add your powdered sugar, and you're going to whisk that until it becomes smooth. At first, you'll notice clumps of powdered sugar, but just keep on whisking. It's going to be a little bit hard on your arm. You might get a little sore, But I promise if you just keep whisking, it will become beautiful and shiny and smooth. The key to these brownies is timing. You want to make sure that your brownies cool, but you also want to make sure that you make your icing right when you're about to ice them, because this is made primarily of butter. So if you make it ahead, it's going to re-solidify and it just won't get that same shine if you have to melt it again. So I just suggest making it right when you know your brownies are about to be completely cooled, and then add it onto your brownie, smooth it out, and then you're going to top it with those classic Cosmic Brownie chocolate covered or candy covered chocolate pieces. This is definitely a lot of icing. You're welcome to decrease the icing amount, but this icing isn't just a buttercream on top of your brownie. It actually does solidify into almost a fudge-like texture, so it really adds to the whole dessert. Me and my husband actually had a date night this night, and so this was kind of the perfect thank you to our babysitters. We left it for them, and when we came back, more than half of the pan was eaten. I mentioned before that this is such a great recipe if you're someone who owns a cottage micro bakery, and that's because this icing does solidify, and that makes packaging a lot more simple than when you have something with a soft buttercream. It can become messy when you're trying to package it. So I highly recommend giving these recipes a go, whether you're someone who works with fresh milled grains or you're just looking for some new recipes to try for the fall. These are both very delicious. I got lots of compliments on these, and I can't wait for you guys to give them both a try. So if you do try this recipe, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you think. As you all know, I love the fall, and I was so excited to have Whitney from Muddy Pike's Pumpkin and Produce come out and decorate the front porch of the bakery. We don't have a lot of space to decorate because we want to have plenty of outdoor seating. We need room for our line, but with what little space she had to work with, I think she made such a difference to the porch's appearance. Those corn shocks are amazing. Those are actually sweet. Those are not sweet corn shocks. Those are field corn shocks, and I feel like they are so much more dramatic. They're so tall, and really those are the thing that made such a difference. I often get asked who lives on the property, so there is actually a house right next to the bakery, and that is where my sister Ellen lives. I own the bakery with my sister Ellen and my dad, and they both live on the property. So Ellen lives in the house right next to the bakery, and my dad lives farther back on the property behind the barns, closer to our woods. So when I have to work, I drive over and I drop my kids off at my mom's house, and then I just head over to the barn. So my kids are close. I try to work between nap times, so whether either in the morning and then take them home for nap time, or in the evening after nap time when my husband's at home. This day was actually a Friday when we were open, and I wasn't scheduled to work, but things started to get very busy, so I actually headed over. I dropped my kids off at my mom's, and then I went to the bakery to help with the Friday rush and prep for Saturday. This day we were kind of on a time crunch because we were going to Hemisphere Coffee Roasters Coffee Summit at 12:30, so we wanted to make sure that we were able to get everything done and be able to head to the coffee summit afterwards. This was actually my sister's first week off of maternity leave. She just had her 5th baby, Ezra Jude. I've mentioned this in a couple of my videos now. And he is doing great, but he is not the best sleeper. So she has her plate full right now, but we are just happy to see her, and things just feel a lot more normal when she is around. So what you see me getting out of the oven is our coffee cake muffins, and I do have that recipe. I will link it below, and we always temperature check those to make sure that they are properly baked. They should reach an internal temperature of 200 degrees. On Fridays, we have a smaller case, and it's usually manned by one person. So Lizzie is working the case this day. She'll make the coffee, she'll get your baked goods together, and then she also does the checkout. When we get busier, one person usually will step in to help with being the barista, but otherwise we then have 2 other employees, whether it be my dad and Ellen, me and my dad, working in the back getting things ready for Saturday morning. We've spent many years trying to perfect each of our recipes, but about 1 year ago, we decided we also wanted to make sure we could offer high-end coffee. So we talked with a local specialty coffee roaster, and we started on our coffee journey. So that meant not just selling brewed coffee, but starting to incorporate espresso drinks, from cortados to flat whites to lattes. So our specialty coffee roaster also was a salesperson of machines. So he sells machines, he repairs machines, and he was able to set us up with a machine and train us on the machine so we can offer high quality coffee for each of our customers. And that is actually the summit we're going to today, just to refresh on our skills and also learn if there's anything new going on in the coffee world. Next thing I had to work on was our chocolate raspberry cake. Long ago, when we first got started, we actually were wedding cake decorators. So my sister Ellen had a cake business that I sometimes helped her with. But when COVID hit, a lot of the weddings were canceled or decreased by a lot. So that's when we started to switch gears. But recently we have started to incorporate cake back into our menu. So this chocolate raspberry cake, the recipe is also on the blog for the chocolate cake and for the chocolate buttercream. And the way we do it so that we can do it in bulk is that we make the chocolate cake batter, we pour it into a sheet pan, and then once it's baked, we freeze it. And that just makes it easier to assemble when we want to put it together. So this is actually a frozen cake that I'm working with, and I'm filling it with a chocolate buttercream and some raspberry jam, and then I'm going to put the second layer of the sheet cake on top. This is really just a great proportion of cake to icing. I think when you just have a single layer sheet cake, I never feel like there's enough cake or enough icing. So the double layer sheet cake is really a great proportion for cake, and it is also a great way to sell it out of the case. So as you can see, I'm lifting the cake up, which would be very difficult if it was freshly baked or even cooled, but because it's frozen, it's very easy to handle. So I'm stacking it, and then I will top it with some more chocolate buttercream, and I actually am going to stop there. I'll top it with chocolate buttercream, and then I'm going to saran it before tomorrow. So because I'm putting saran wrap over this so that it stays fresh for the next day, I don't want to put the jam on because the jam always sticks to the saran wrap and I always end up having to redo the jam. So we're just going to cover this in buttercream, saran it, and then we'll finish decorating it tomorrow. Ellen will put on some piping, and then we'll top it with that jam. So I'm kind of just getting this put together, and then Ellen will kind of do the finishing touches. She was the cake decorator, and she definitely knows what she's doing. And so I always think I've done all I can to make the cake look good, and then somehow she comes in and she makes it look even better. So she always kind of takes over. This would be another recipe I think would be great for cottage bakers, especially if you live in a state where butter is considered okay under cottage food law. This is very easy to prepare in bulk, especially if you use 2 sheet pans. So today you see me only using 1 sheet pan and kind of making like a half of a cake. With our coconut cake, because it's more popular, we actually bake 2 sheet pans full of cake and then we stack them. So it creates this huge sheet pan of cake. So you're able to create a lot in bulk. The only thing that might be a little more tricky is packaging because you're using this fluffy buttercream. But if you get the right clamshell or box that's big enough, I believe this would be a great item for your customers. And here Ellen is just kind of fixing the unevenness that maybe I left behind, and she does make it look perfect. And then we also have to bake all of our focaccia on Friday for sandwiches for tomorrow. And then we have to get all cleaned up so that we are ready to be open again on Saturday. So that means sweeping, mopping, getting all the pans prepped for the next day, and making sure the outside looks good. We do have, kids that live here, so we got to be careful, or we want to let them just play, with all the stuff. But then we do have to make sure everything's clean for when our customers come. So most of the time there's plenty of bikes on the porch. Sometimes the tables are used to make forts, but everything has to be transformed back into business ready by Friday and Saturday. And now me, my dad, and Lizzie are heading to the coffee summit. As I mentioned, this is put on by Hemisphere Coffee Roasters. They are our specialty coffee roasters for our bakery. We just started using them about a year ago, and I have loved working with them. They're both so kind. They're never pushy. They're never trying to really push anything on you or sell you anything. They just really believe in how good their coffee is, and for good reason. It is delicious. We got to meet other cafe owners and coffee shop owners who sell Hemisphere coffee. We got a little bag full of samples of syrups and different items. And then we also got to watch several demonstrations. So we got to learn a little bit more about some barista techniques, kind of a refresher on drip times and how to properly grind your coffee and dial in your grinder. And then also we got to have a little demonstration on some new equipment. And then while I was here, I went ahead and ordered some bags to sell at the bakery. We have a lot of our customers that love our house blend, so I went ahead and got some ground so that we can sell it on the homestead table. And this is their grinder, and all their employees are so lovely to talk to, and they let me kind of film the process. And so our blend is called Bakery Blend. And I got to kind of look through all of their different offerings, and it smelled so good back here. If you saw any new recipes that you are looking for and you can't find on the blog, be sure to comment below. And if you like these videos, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you're looking for more recipes and baking tips, be sure to check out our blog, theflowerbarnhomestead.com. Thank you guys for watching.